So this video is to try to clear up some of the misunderstandings that came out in your quizzes on muscle relaxants. And so I want to revisit with you the concept of central versus direct acting muscle relaxants. So if you look at this picture, it's showing us the anatomical setup we have in the body about how our muscles are controlled. So here we have the spinal cord. And remember that the spinal cord is going to be part of the central nervous system. So messages from our brain's cerebrum are going to be coming down through the spinal cord, and then those neurons are going to become motor nerves that are going to run out towards the body's muscles. So if we have a centrally acting drug, its action is going to be here on the neurons inside the central nervous system. When we hear the word direct acting muscle relaxant, here the drug's going to be acting directly at the muscle, so either between the motor neuron and the muscle and the what we call the neuromuscular junction, or even inside the muscle cell itself. So we have these actual site of action differences, and because we're going to have different sites of action, we would also expect then to have different mechanisms of action as well for these drugs. So here on this picture you can start to see we've mentioned that one of the most common direct-acting drugs is dantrolene, and here it is, direct-acting because it's right at the muscle. We also mentioned baclofen and diazepam as centrally acting because they act on the GABA receptors that we have in the central nervous system. So if we move on and we do a side-by-side comparison, the direct acting and central acting drugs have multiple names, just like a lot of other drug classes that we look at. So the central acting are spasmolytics or antispasmic drugs. And their site of action is in the central nervous system, so generally right at the spinal cord. These drugs, depending on their metabolism, they also might affect the brain as well. So their mechanism of action is that they are GABA agonists. So they are going to work to hyperpolarize neurons in the central nervous system and depress them so that they do not secrete acetylcholine or their neurotransmitter. And as less acetylcholine is secreted, then downstream the motor neurons are not going to receive the message to activate the muscle cell. Direct acting by comparison, direct acting drugs also have multiple names. We hear them called neuromuscular blockers or peripherally acting because they're in the periphery. They're not in the central nervous system. So out and about, outside the periphery is where they work. So they work at the neuromuscular junction. So think about where acetylcholine is released from the neuron. So once it leaves that neuron and is in the neuromuscular junction, that's where these drugs come to play. So you have the acetylcholine there, you have acetylcholine esterases, and the acetylcholine receptors on the muscle cell. So how they work is they work to inhibit acetylcholine signal. So it inhibits the contraction signal of acetylcholine at the muscle. And there's two groups. We have what we call the non-depolarizing, and so that allows for one depolarization. So there's the drug that does this is also called it's labeled here 2 stars to remind you, succinylcholine. So it binds to the acetylcholine receptor and it causes a depolarization. After that one depolarization, the drug hangs on and it has a high affinity for that receptor so that acetylcholine cannot bind to it. So now it's occupying the receptor and that that muscle cell is not going to depolarize again. The other type that we have are non-depolarizing direct-acting drugs. And so these are antagonists to acetylcholine. So they're going to be blocking the receptor, and the cells will not undergo a depolarization. So I hope this helps to clear up differences between these two drug classes that we have. And if you have any other questions before your exam, please let me know.